Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Hey guys, Jim here. Welcome in once again. We're going to take a look at something that I didn't even know existed until about a week ago when I got an instant message from Instagram user Instagram Ham. And he says, "Hey man, I just got this really cool Russian-made knife. It's on its way to me. Do you want to check it out when I get it? Because I think it's going to be something pretty special." And so I took a look at the Mad Russian Custom Instagram account, and I saw the knives that they were making, and I'm like, yeah, man, that looks pretty damn cool. I'd love to check it out whenever you're past your honeymoon period. And he got this thing sent out to me really fast, and I had to say, absolutely, thank you so much for doing that and for donating your knife so generously and so quickly right after getting it, and letting me play with it for a little bit and share it with my audience. So what Mad Russian Custom is, it's a collaboration between two partners, and they are Roman Romanov and Dmitry Streltsov. Wait, I am mispronouncing that. Streltsov. Obviously, two Russians, hence the name of the company. And what they have primarily been known for, man, that looks so good, doesn't it? Is Roman is the founder of Starling Gear. If you guys don't know what Starling Gear is, that's some wild, crazy jewelry, usually skull influenced, and customization on lanyard beads, things like that. And then Dmitry, who is a pen maker and jeweler who specializes in working in titanium. And they got together, and not only have they created this brand where they're making their own knives, which this is one of them, this is the Alfa, but they also have done customization and modifications on a lot of other knives like Shirogorov and Striders and things like that. And they've done some really wild looking stuff between engravings and carvings and finish work. Really cool stuff. Now, I'm not altogether too familiar with them or most of their work, unfortunately, so I'm pretty new to this. But what we're looking at here is their own creation, the Alfa, and this one is number 19, Alfa number 19. And right off the bat, what I'll tell you is this: it's a big ass knife. No two ways around it. But in typical Russian design fashion, you've got something that has very uniquely shaped handles. Actually fits really good in the hand. So when you're holding it, even though you know you're still holding a large, long knife, it doesn't feel too unwieldy. The titanium, the milling work that's been done in the titanium, the machine work is fantastic. It's got a nice micro milled pattern in there. Very nicely done. You've got pivot collars around the pivot. And then when you look at the matching back spacer and pocket clip, you want to call this Timascus. However, I don't believe that it is. I think that it's a titanium Damascus that's forged in Russia, because I know that Russia has been doing a Timascus / Mokutai type material for a number of years. So I'm going to assume that that was sourced locally and that it's not actually Alpha Knife Supply Timascus that was shipped over to Russia to be worked on. So you've got something, it's got a little pop of color and an otherwise all kind of plain Jane titanium frame lock. Ergonomics are pretty nice. I like all of the shaping of the handle. It looks really, really cool, and it feels really nice. It's a little bit blocky in the hand, and the clip is an absolute hotspot, so I'll put that out there right away. And for a lot of people, the detent is going to be too strong. It's a very, very strong detent. I happen to like that, but some people might consider that to be a finger breaker. Now let's get into the TLDW. We'll talk about all the high points and low points of the knife. And then after that, we'll do the specs. And then I'll give you my overall thoughts all together on the knife. TLDW, too long, didn't watch. The pros on this knife are its unique design. It doesn't really look like anything else that I've handled or anything else that I've really seen. You've got a very aggressively designed frame that, even though it's got a few little hot spots, the shape of it is comfortable in the hand. I really like the shape of it. The blade shape, I would call it a modified sheep's foot. I like how that's shaped. I like that it's got a nice, very, very thin edge. This is a hollow ground blade. So this is going to be a really, really good slicer. Another pro for me are the small details, like the milled pattern that's in the titanium. The fact that it is a slightly contoured frame as well. And the pivot collars. Nice attention to detail, custom made pivot, custom pivot collars. Looks really, really good. Another pro, and a lot of people won't usually look at it like this, but a lot of times we like to see less hardware. I actually like the hardware on this because it's there to accentuate these two peaks and the end of the handle. It flows well with the design, and it's kind of a big, brutish looking knife. So I don't mind having the hardware on there. It kind of adds to the overall effect. Another thing that I like is the very pronounced sharpening choil. It's going to be very, very easy to get in there and sharpen this blade for a good long time. Now, the cons. As I mentioned earlier, it's got a very, very strong detent. For me personally, that's a pro. And I think for some people who aren't accustomed to something like a David Mosier or a Pohan Lu that has a very, very strong detent, you might not like that because it is going to be a little bit more laborious to get it flipped open. But you've got a monster blade. It's pretty thick and it's very, very long. So having that stronger detent really lets you preload that to make sure that enormous blade always makes it out to full lock. The other cons, the hot spot created by the clip. When you've got this in your hand, you notice it. It's almost like it's interacting so much with the palm of your hand that you can't ignore the fact that it's there. It's just there. However, for a standard everyday carry knife or a collector's knife, that's not that big of an issue. If this was going to be a hard user, where you're gripping down on that handle a lot and you're doing some very rigorous cutting where the knife might be wanting to kind of tweak around in your hand a little bit or torque around in your hand a little bit, that might become more of an issue. But I really don't see somebody taking a knife like this and hard using it. This is more of a collector's grade knife that I think somebody's probably just going to have as pocket jewelry, may have it in their collection to kind of look at and flip every now and then and just admire it. And I think another con for me is the The lock bar tension is very, very heavy. Now, I think that they've done that intentionally to give you that very strong detent. It's seating that detent in the detent hole very, very strongly. But you notice how little tension has been relieved when you go to unlock it. So I would love to see a little more relief there. I would love to see the lock bar a little bit easier to unlock. By the way, there's no lock stick whatsoever. Lockup is great. There's no lock stick. The blade centering is perfect. The overall construction of this knife is really, really, really well done. What I'd love to tell you is how much the knife is. Unfortunately, I do not know. Everything that I have used to reference this knife, it's all been in Russian, and I can't read Russian. So unfortunately, I do not know. I know that Recon 1 had some up for sale at some point. I just don't remember what the prices were. Recon 1 is also sold many of the customized and modified knives that these guys have worked on. And over at Monkey Edge, I know that Monkey Edge has done the same thing with some of the Striders that these guys have customized. And I'm sure they were, all of those, the Shiros and the Striders were probably ungodly expensive. So overall, I think it's a really, really nice knife. I can't give you a proper evaluation as to whether it's worth the money because I don't know what they charge. If I were to guess, I'd say this is probably, with the titanium Damascus bits on there, I would say this is probably right around a $1,200 knife. I could be way off. This could be an $800 knife for all I know. Or it could be an $1,800 knife. I truly do not know. But I would look at this, after handling it and looking at it, I would say I would feel comfortable spending around $1,200 on it. I wouldn't feel that I've overpaid in any way. When you look at some of the smaller details on this, like the mirror polishing that just goes around this bevel that's on the perimeter edges of the choil here, you can see that they've put a good amount of thought into the work on this knife and put a good amount of time into it as well. So that's also where I justify spending over $1,000 on something like this. Very smooth action. I'm going to have to assume that's on bearings. I have not obviously taken the knife apart because this is a guest blade. It is not my knife. I don't see anything in there. Let's, oh boy, that detent. Woo. See, it's such a smooth action that it could very well be washers, but it seems to me with the speed of it that it's bearings. I'm going to go with my guess. I'm going to go with my gut and say that it's a bearing pivot. Also looks like they have a lock face insert built in, so you have steel on steel lockup. And right in there you can see the over travel bar, so it prevents you from overextending the lock bar, which it takes quite a bit of effort to move the lock bar as it is. Don't think you really had to worry about that too much. Love the spine they put on the back spacer. So you've got all these bevels that are ground into the back spacer. And then you have the hidden lanyard opening back there. Really, really nicely done. All of the perimeter edges of the frame are nicely chamfered, so you don't have to worry about any harsh edge digging into your hand there. I can tell you right now, for any normal person, you would sit there and flip and close this knife for about a half hour, and you'd probably feel like your index finger hurts and your thumb would probably be tired because of the hard detent and the high strength to the tension of that lock bar. All right, I promised you specs, so I'll get that out of the way too. We're looking at an overall length of 9.5 inches. Yowza. Yeah, I told you, it's a big boy. You're getting into PMP knives territory there with the very, very large size. And a blade length of 4 inches. Now, I don't know, is the blade steel marked on here? I'm pretty sure it is. M398. So you have a very competent steel, very good EDC steel that's going to be excellent for pretty much every cutting task that it ever encounters. Good corrosion resistance, fan-friggin-tastic edge retention, and M398 will take a hair-whittling, super thin edge, which is really good for this because it's hollow ground. It's got a very nice hollow grind to it. It's going to be very, very sharp. Overall, I'm impressed. I don't know that I would, break open the piggy bank and deplete my funds to have one in my collection. But now that I've handled one, and once I find out the pricing, I think I'm going to make it a goal to add one of these to my collection. I really like the overall aesthetics of it. Few little niggles aside, I think it's a knife that I would enjoy carrying, a knife that I would enjoy using. And it doesn't hurt that there's a skull on the blade. I'm always a sucker for a good skull. Damn good looking knife. I like the contrast with the colors. Having that additional pop of anodized color on the titanium Damascus looks really good against this otherwise very, very dark titanium frame lock. And I've never had a problem owning finger-breaking strong detents. It's the kind of thing that I got used to over the years, and I kind of appreciate it in certain knives. I'll tell you what, though, I would love to see this in a 3.5-inch version. If this was a 3.5 to, say, 3.65 blade length, then I think it would be maybe more perfecter. I think it would be a really, really great size. Obviously, with a name like Alfa, even though they spell it A-L-F-A, not A-L-P-H-A, it's obviously meant to be a very domineering design, meant to be a dominant knife in your collection. I get that. But man, I would love to have this in a more EDC-able size, like a 3.5-inch blade. Now, since they're making custom knives, it may be something where that can be requested. Now, you need to be careful with shit like that because when you start talking to a custom maker and you're like, I love this knife, but can you change the proportions? You're actually asking a lot more of them than you think. Because not only, if I said, hey, I want this knife, but I want a 3.5-inch blade, not only are they shortening the blade, they have to change the height of the blade and the thickness of the blade stock they use so it all remains proportional. So it still looks like this. It doesn't look like it's stubby and cut off on the end. They have to modify the size and all of the dimensions of the frame for it to accommodate that new blade. And it is probably going to change the geometry in here between the pivot, the blade stop, and the lock interface. So if you're working with a custom maker and you decide, hey, I love your design, but I'd love a different size, please keep in mind that you're actually asking them to re-engineer an entirely new knife for you. It's not a simple, easy little thing to do. But for me, I'm going to keep an eye on their Instagram, and if they ever release like an Alpha Mini or an Alpha Junior or whatever they choose to name it, and they ever go into a 3.5-inch blade length, I think I might have to drop everything at that moment, assuming that the price is where I would want it to be, because again, I do not know what these sell for. I could be building myself up excitement here, and then they could be far out of the price range that I want to spend. But assuming they hit that size and the price was where I felt comfortable, I think I'd like to have one of these in my collection as well. So anyway, Thank you guys for joining me as always. I'm going to move on out of here, and I'm going to go on to the extreme opposite end of the spectrum, and I'm going to review the least expensive, I should just say cheapest because it feels cheap and looks cheap. I'm going to go from this, a beautiful premium custom made knife, into the cheapest knife I have ever reviewed on my channel's entire history. I'm not even certain that I want to do it, but it's here, and I feel like it's my duty to do so. So I'm going to get to work on that, and I'll see you guys on future videos.